Forward button here too. So welcome both of you, virtual Warwicks. Wish it was different time that we could all be together. I was telling Paula and Nancy in the green room, I remember the great day that we had Paula back at the very beginning when Girl on the Train hit, and what exciting that was. And I feel like we're in the same sort of moment with Nancy, only we're doing it virtually. So it's a little bit different of a feeling, but we're so excited to be here talking about the first day of spring. And oh my goodness, I cannot wait for this conversation. But before we get started, I'm going to just give Facebook a minute or two to let everybody know that we're here and tell you a little bit about Warwicks, because I think we figured out that we've got pretty much half the globe covered with time zone here. We're out on the West Coast in La Jolla, San Diego, California, and Nancy and Paula are 8 hours away in the UK. So we've got it all covered, but we're so glad that you both are here with us. Real quick about Warwicks, like I said, we're located in San Diego, La Jolla, California. We are been open, well, we've actually been open for 125 years. So by UK standards, we're still probably a baby, but by the US standards, we're kind of an old school here. So we're a little bit of an old institution. We're going to be celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. So we're very excited about that. If you are in the San Diego, La Jolla area, we would love for you to come by and shop with us. Nothing better than coming in a bookshop and seeing all of the great new titles that are out there. But if you are, unfortunately, we can't ship the books to the UK, and I don't think it's released in the UK yet, but for those that are listening throughout the lower 48, as we like to say, I'm going to put the first day of spring into the comment section, and you can easily click that and purchase that as well. Paula, you've got a new book coming out. We can do some pre-orders for that. So I'm going to probably put that into the chat as well. And there's a way for you to, if you're watching on, I'm recording this, so some people might be watching it on YouTube, so there's no live interaction with that. But if you're on Facebook with us now live, in the comment section, you can go ahead and put your questions in that comment section, and I will be bringing those to Nancy and Paula. They're going to chat for about 35-ish minutes, something like that, and then I'll bring those in. So without further ado, Nancy, you might have one of the shortest bios, but hopefully, Paula, you'll get a little more into it. But Nancy Tucker studied psychology at the University of Oxford. The First Day of Spring is her first work of fiction. She has other books, but maybe we won't talk about those. And Paula Hawkins, we all know and love from The Girl on the Train. Worked as a journalist for 15 years before turning her hand to fiction. She is the author of 2 #1 best-selling novels, Into the Water, which I love that one too, and The Girl on the Train, an international #1 bestseller, and has sold over 23 million copies worldwide and has been adapted into a major motion picture. Paula was born in Zimbabwe and now lives in London, but is joining us, I think, from Edinburgh today. So
yes, I am. That's
there
right.
You go. All right, ladies, have a great conversation. We'll see you in about a half hour.
Thank you.
Lily. Thank you. Hi, Nancy.
Hello, Paula.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. Congratulations on this wonderful debut novel. It really is. It's such a powerful and thought-provoking book. I was hoping you could just start off by telling us a bit about it. Just introduce it for us.
Yes, of course. So The First Day of Spring tells the story of Chrissy. Chrissy is 8 years old, and she spends most of her time getting up to kind of various forms of mischief. She steals sweets, she steals from other people, she's kind of indiscriminately nasty to other children. And we open with that mischief escalating to crime when she kills a toddler by strangulation. And through the rest of the book, we see how the community that she lives in reacts to this atrocity, and we also come to understand a bit more about the kind of circumstances that pushed her to do what she did. That story is intertwined with the story of Julia, who is in fact not a new character, but Chrissy as an adult. And in this storyline, 15 years have passed and Chrissy has been released from an institution with a new identity. So she's trying to navigate a different world as a different person, but most importantly, she's trying to raise her own 5-year-old daughter, Molly. And all of that is threatened when it appears that her past is trying to force its way into the present.
It really is an extraordinary, tense and gripping novel. It's also very touching and very tender, but when I read it a few months ago for the first time, I was captivated from the start by Chrissy's unforgettable voice. And I know that you said that she arrived in your head fully formed. I was wondering if you know, where did she come from?
It's a very good question. I always say Chrissy arrived in my head fully formed, to the extent that I do sometimes find it quite hard to answer questions about the decisions I made in kind of sculpting her, and the decisions I made about how she would act, what she would say, etc. But then I hear myself say that, and I think that's such an annoying thing to say, and such a lazy thing to say, because that's not, she's not real. Obviously, that's not how it works. I did create her, and obviously I did make some decisions along the way. And I think saying she arrived in my head fully formed, it becomes just a way to sidestep difficult questions. So I think thinking about the things that were significant in terms of influencing her, there were a couple of things. Shortly before I started writing the book, I watched a short film, I think it's called Detainment. It was a dramatization of police interviews with the two boys who killed James Bulger. And I was it was a very kind of interesting, striking film. And I was particularly struck by the contrast between the atrocity of that crime and the atrocity of the content of the interviews, but the way the children conducted themselves like any other children. And that really rang true in terms of my experience of working in child and adolescent psychiatry, working with children affected by really severe, really vicious mental illnesses, who would have occasional episodes of complete distress or rage or psychosis even. And then for the other kind of 80-90% of the time would be just kind of ordinary kids that you wouldn't know no different from kind of any kid in any playground or a supermarket. And I think children are quite skilled, strangely, at that selective detachment from their problems and from things they've done that perhaps they wish they hadn't done. I really wanted to draw that out in Chrissy. I think she even says, I have days where I was the person who killed Stephen, and then I have days off from being the person who killed Stephen. So I think that was significant. Also, I think it was significant that in the period before I wrote the book, I'd been doing some work in a primary school. I think that just meant that I was very in tune with the kind of rhythms and eccentricities of young children. And I think that was probably the single most significant thing in terms of meaning, that when I sat down to write a novel, it was a child's voice that was in my mind.
And I think that comes through incredibly strongly. You've also written that you hope that this book will encourage readers to consider the circumstances that lead people to do terrible things. As someone who loves an origin story, that really connected with me. Because you present us with this really challenging character. Chrissy is not a likable child. She's mean, she's a bully, she's really horrible to her supposed best friend, Linda. And she seems sort of utterly unrepentant about what she's done. But then bit by bit, you start to redeem her. Could you just talk a bit about how you managed to do that?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Chrissy is a monster. She's a monster because of the fact of her crime, but even apart from the fact of her crime, she's rude, she's completely self-centered, she has no manners, she's dirty, she's kind of unpalatable in the ways that we want our main characters to be palatable. And I suppose when you put it like that, it feels like a kind of, you could say it was a really bold decision as an author. It never felt that way, partly because of the Chrissy arrived with me fully formed spiel, but also because I think if we look at Chrissy's life, she's never been treated with any warmth, any kindness, any compassion. She has her two main role models, her mum and her dad, who never behave well. So where would Chrissy have learnt to behave well? That's kind of the point I started from. She wasn't learning to behave at home. She wasn't learning to behave at school. Her school appeared to kind of blacklist her and think, oh, she's a bad seed, let's not bother. So it seemed like it was kind of obvious that she would be this little monster. And I also, it's more of a personal thing, but I think I react really strongly against fiction in which children are exposed to horrendous maltreatment and somehow emerge from this horrendous maltreatment as kind of doe-eyed, winsome little moppets. I find it really patronising and sort of disgusting in a way, which is maybe really unfair because I'm sure that does happen sometimes, but I just find it lazy. I think it can be lazy writing. I think it can encourage laziness in readers because it's spoon-feeding emotions. It's kind of telling us how we should feel. And there's no challenge there. You know, we don't have to tussle with any of our own feelings about characters. And I think that's a massive part of the interest in reading fiction. That's not really answering your question. You asked about how she is redeemed. I didn't feel like it was a conscious construction effort in terms of constructing empathy for her. I felt more like it was just revealing what was always there. So I think significant things we learn about Chrissy, we learn just how dire her circumstances are, her home circumstances. We learn how little understanding she had of the crime she committed. And then also, as the book unfolds, we just learn more about Chrissy. We get to know Chrissy better. And we stop seeing her so much as just the girl who says, you know, I killed a boy and I don't care. We come to see her, you know, the kind of the humor she has, the resilience she has. And probably most importantly, she is vulnerable. She has kind of ultimate vulnerability. I think she gets more and more vulnerable as the novel goes on. And I think in a way, it's quite hard not to empathize with someone who has that much vulnerability. She's like, I think of her as kind of coiled around this center that is entirely liquid. You know, she's coiled very tightly, and she lashes out to stop people getting at her core, which is actually, you know, pathetic. I think she's a pathetic character.
That you talked about her sort of lack of understanding, lack of complete understanding of what she's actually done. Do you think if it was an older child, because Chrissy's only 8, isn't she, when this happens, an older child, it would be less, we wouldn't be able to redeem her? Or do you think any young person is redeemable if they come from that sort of terrible background?
I think it's an interesting question. And I think her youth and her background are sort of inextricable, because at the age of 8, she doesn't have, I don't think she has a normal age, you know, she doesn't have an adult understanding of death, but I don't think she even has a normal 8-year-old understanding of death. I think by the age of 8, most children know that death is irreversible and makes people very, very sad. You know, even Linda, Chrissy's best friend, she's not Brain of Britain, but I think she would understand that if someone dies, they don't come back. Chrissy has never had a chance to learn that, because she's not only not been taught the truth, but she's actively been fed lies. You know, she has this father figure who is a kind of occasional father. He sort of flits in and out of her life. And the way that her mother explains his prolonged absences is by saying he dies. You know, he dies for a while and then he comes back. And so what Chrissy sees is, you know, she has a father in her life at times, she loves him very much. Then there's a kind of bust up between her mum and her dad, usually involving her mum physically hurting her father. And then, you know, dad goes away for a while, her mum says, oh, he's dead. And then he comes back. So Chrissy's grasp of death is it's just like it's like a slightly more serious form of hurting. Like, you can hurt someone, you can make them dead for a little while, but then they come back. So I think those two things are bound up together. And I think it means that if a character were either older or better cared for, then the kind of redemption arc might be more difficult. It might be a sort of steeper hill to climb.
Yeah. So Chrissy arrives in your head fully formed, so you say, with some caveats there. But how about Julia? So Julia is, as you explained, actually the same character, but it's Chrissy as an adult and who seems like a very different person. How did you come to create her? I mean, because in part, I think some of her experiences are informed by your own. Is that right?
Yes. I think if Chrissy kind of arrived with me fully formed, Julia, I had to tease out more. It was maybe a more conventional experience of writing characters. I felt I had to get to know her. I had to work at finding out who she was. And it was quite difficult, I found, and I'm not even sure if I got it spot on, really. It was quite difficult to strike the right balance between the essence of Chrissy and an adult who was appreciably different to Chrissy because of the experiences she's had in the interim. I think one of the things that I suppose I came to feel that, you know, the experience of writing Julia, I would say, was more arduous than the experience of writing Chrissy, which was quite energizing and exhilarating in some ways. Writing Julia felt more like a kind of slog at times, but I came to feel that was quite appropriate, really, because that's sort of the relationship between them. You know, Chrissy makes a mess, Chrissy doesn't care. Julia spends her life dealing with the mess that Chrissy made. And it's quite fun making a mess. It's not really fun cleaning up a mess. Julia is she's shouldering all of the guilt and all of the regret that Chrissy didn't feel. She's influenced by my experiences to the extent that she spends all of her adolescent years in secure care. I spent most of my adolescence very unwell with eating disorders, which it's not the same as going to prison, but I think it's a sort of prison of your own making. It means that you spend a great deal of time looking inwards and not looking outwards. Julia didn't have the option of looking outwards because she wasn't exposed to the outside world. I suppose I felt that when I started to recover as a young adult, it did have that effect of making me feel that I was suddenly thrown into a world that I'd spent a long time exempt from, and a world that had moved on in my absence, and a world that I didn't really understand and hadn't really planned to have to understand. I think when you're that unwell with an eating disorder, you don't spend that much time thinking about the future. You're very, very wrapped up in the here and now. And Julia says, I was thrown into a life I hadn't expected to have to live, in a world I hadn't expected to have to understand. That's very much how I felt when I started to get better from being unwell.
Yeah, I'd actually pulled out that quote: "The people in charge had hidden me away and thrown me into a life I hadn't expected to live." That's what Julia says. I was wondering how much you were thinking there. I mean, I know this is not like a political book, but whether this was a comment on the way we treat young offenders. Are you sort of saying that there might be a better way to deal with people who commit crimes when they're children, other than to just shut them away and then release them?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a very big question. I don't feel like I am expert really in any way on how we do deal with young offenders. And I think actually I would say that Chrissy is remarkably successfully rehabilitated by the time she spends in secure care. I actually think it's more of a success story than a failure story. Because if we think about the Chrissy we see go into Haverley, which is the secure care home that she enters, that Chrissy, she's all the things we already discussed. She's a monster, she's kind of unkempt, she's not able to conduct herself as a normal person, she's not able to conduct herself as a normal child even. And then Julia, who emerges from Haverley, in her relationship with Molly, she is patient, she's able to put herself second, she's sensible. And I feel that those are skills that she learned in secure care. We know for a fact she didn't learn them at home. And there's really no doubt in my mind that if Chrissy had spent those years at home rather than in an institution, she wouldn't have been able to be the successful parent that she is to Molly. I think her feelings of being unable to navigate the world outside prison are partly inevitable because of the nature of confinement. People are locked away for a long time, and I think in a way that's necessary, because the work that Chrissy has to do while she's in Haverley is quite extensive. She has to be effectively reparented. That takes a long time. And I also think if anything, it's a comment on how much she has accepted the weight of what she did, because she doesn't imagine that she will ever be set free. And when she is, it comes as a shock. And I think not entirely a welcome shock. I think there's a part of Chrissy that would really like to have stayed in an institution forever and have people take care of her. So she thinks, someone who's done something this bad, because she does at that point realize how bad it is. Someone who's done something this bad surely will never be allowed back into the real world. And so then, the knowledge that she is going out into the real world, that comes as a real shock. And I think that's what leads to that overwhelming kind of bewilderment.
Yes, because she says that she feels as though she is in disguise as another species.
Yeah.
That's how she talks about it. But it struck me that actually, although obviously her situation is very extreme, I imagine that what she is feeling is actually felt by a lot of people to a lesser degree, particularly I think new mothers who feel that they're not doing this right, and everybody else seems like they are doing it right. Is that something you'd sort of thought about, that this is like how a lot of young mothers might feel?
It's something that I had to imagine, because I'm not a young mother, not any kind of mother at the moment, maybe in the future. It's something I had to imagine. The feeling of I am inadequate, I don't know how to do the things that everyone else knows how to do. That's something that I know I feel a lot, and I think probably we all feel a lot. I think being an author can be quite bad for that, because there are so many levels upon which you can compare yourself to other people and find yourself lacking. And I've always thought that being a new mother must be quite unique in its ability to draw that out of you, that feeling of everybody else knows how to do this and I've got no idea. And I think it's quite interesting that, not to give too much away, but there's a point when Chrissy kind of, she learns from her mother that her mother had feelings very much of, you know, I didn't know how to look after a baby. I didn't know what to do with you. And that's an interesting point of similarity, but also difference between Julia and her mother, because Julia really has those feelings with Molly. You know, she feels kind of helpless. What do I do? She's crying. I don't know what to do. But Julia's response to that is to muddle through and, you know, make it work. Whereas Chrissy's mother's response was to just say, I'm not doing it. It's too hard. Don't want to parent.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's Julia's expectations of what a mother should offer are pretty low, but as a result of her experience with her mum, she's sort of surprised when her mum can remember how old she is. I mean, you have that terribly tender, because despite her mother being such a neglectful mother, Julia still wants her to love her somehow, or wants to please her. She can't sort of escape that. Yeah,
well, Chrissy, I mean, I suppose thinking about Chrissy's childhood and Chrissy's experience of childhood, she had to find a way to get through it. And she is an incredibly resilient kind of little ball of skin and bones and energy. She's like a little kind of cat, you know, those sort of tiny, I think of her as a kind of tiny animal that you see it on the street and you can't believe it's alive, but it is. And I think that one of the ways that she does that is through scavenging. And it's not just of food, she does a lot of scavenging of food, but she's also kind of scavenging for care and affection. And if you kind of look at her relationship with her mum in detail, it's not that her mother gives her nothing full stop. Her mum gives her tiny little nuggets of something every now and again, and they don't come regularly and they don't come frequently, but they do come, and it can be as tiny as, you know, a bit of food or a bit of touch or a word that's a bit less vicious. And Chrissy kind of, she dives on them and she sucks all of the possible nourishment she can get out of it, and she makes it last and makes it last until the next time something's coming. And in a way, I think that's the most cruel thing. That's the most cruel thing about the way Chrissy's mother treats her, because it means that Chrissy can't quite let go, and she can't let go as an adult either, because she's learned to be so fixated on when is that next little bit coming that she can't quite let go of the hope that they're going to be, you know, I've got to be holding on because otherwise I'll miss the next little thing that I so need to keep me going. I don't think Chrissy's mother does it out of cruelty, actually. I think she does it out of hopelessness. I think it's neglect rather than conscious abuse with Chrissy's mum, I think. But its effect is very cruel.
Yes, it seems to me that is psychologically incredibly truthful. That feels very real. That feels as though that is exactly how you would respond. We witnessed Chrissy's relationship with her mother, her sort of desperation for a real relationship with her father. In fact, the only, perhaps the fullest, the most reciprocated relationship that Chrissy has is with this friend of hers, Linda, to whom she is really not very nice at all. But Linda is really the only person who seems to offer her compassion and understanding. What is it about Linda, do you think, that gives her that capacity?
It's a good question. I loved writing Chrissy's relationship with Linda. I really loved it because it is such an oasis of love and warmth in Chrissy's life. The rest of her life is so barren. I think, thinking about Linda as a character, there are a couple of things that I think allow her to show compassion towards Chrissy. I think, you know, she's not intelligent. And that's a fact, you know, there's no pathology there, and it's not a kind of, it's not an insult, but she is, you know, she has a low IQ. She's not an intelligent person. And I think she is therefore able to access Chrissy on quite a simple level. She lacks style, you know, Linda lacks any kind of cunning, really any kind of calculation. She thinks in quite a simple way. And I think therefore she accesses Chrissy at quite a simple level. Also, I think Linda comes from a very secure, loving, stable Christian home where compassion and kind of forgiveness and warmth are really nurtured and also really held up as important values. I think it's an interesting relationship because you say Chrissy is horrible to Linda, and she is. She absolutely is horrible to Linda. She's a little bully. But then I think the relationship is more mutually gainful than it perhaps at first appears, because it's obvious what Chrissy gets from Linda. You know, she gets the warmth. She gets to go over to her warm house and have meals sometimes. She gets the kind of unquestioning loyalty. But Linda actually does get quite a bit from Chrissy too. Chrissy is fierce in her defense of Linda, fierce. She defends her to the end. And I think for Linda, Chrissy is quite a exciting, dynamic person. You know, she has ideas and they have adventures, and Linda is kind of caught up in the slipstream. And, you know, it's not what Linda's mother would want, but I think it is what Linda wants. I think Linda wants a leader. She wants someone to follow. And Chrissy is that person. And Chrissy is also, I kind of know this to be true, Chrissy is kind of high status in the way that naughty children often are. You know, she's kind of someone that people probably would quite like to be friends with in a strange sort of way, because she is outrageous and kind of dangerous. And I think in a way Linda feels quite special that Chrissy's chosen her as her friend. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You can see that. And you talk about Linda's really nice family and the Christian home that she comes from, and you really created a sense of a community where families know and support each other. I was wondering, because I don't think you ever named the place. Did you have a particular place in mind? Where does that setting come from?
No, it's not named. That's deliberate because I think, although it couldn't be set anywhere, it could be set in any one of quite a large number of places. In my mind, it is set in a kind of small town in the north of England in the 60s, 70s, that kind of place. That era. But the specific place, I think, is less important than the ingredients of the place, which are, as you say, the strong sense of community, the high level of freedom afforded to children, and I suppose that undercurrent of poverty and the strain that is placed on everyone by there not being much to go around. Yeah, yes.
There's a real, as I think mentioned before, there's a real sort of thriller's tension to this book. I mean, you've spoken about it. It's very clear that from a psychological point of view, it's extremely detailed and very truthful, but there is also this great, like, gripping storyline of what is going to happen to these people, and the structure goes back and forth between Chrissy and Julia, and there is real tension in both timelines. I was wondering, did you plot that all out from the start? Did you know where you were going? How did that happen?
I don't plot anything.
Okay.
I don't plot anything. I hate planning. I hate planning books. I hate planning days out. I hate planning meals. I hate it. It makes me just want to cry and lie in a dark room and just disengage. So no, I didn't plan anything really. And I wrote the book, all of Chrissy and then all of Julia. And I sent it to my very lovely, long-suffering agent, who said, this is fine, but I really think we need to intertwine these storylines. And I said, no, you're absolutely wrong. And she said, no, I think it would be good. I said, no, you know nothing. She said, no, why don't you have a go? And I did it, and it was immediately much better. And there was much gnashing of teeth. But no, I don't think I'm a bad author, but I think I'm an author who requires quite intensive editing because of my real hatred for organisation in my writing.
That's fascinating, because it does fit together perfectly. So you must have spent quite some time. That's more than I deserve.
I deserve for it to be a mess because I was so lazy about it. I'm thrilled that it works.
It really does. You've also said that it was joyful to write, which may come as a surprise to some people, because it's really quite sort of it's a very dark subject. Obviously, well, we've talked about it's incredibly dark. So what made it joyful? Was it the process itself, or was it cathartic? What was it about it?
Yes, both of those in a way. I think I do worry a bit that maybe that's a horribly callous thing to say, that it was joyful. And it was my experience. My mum always says no one has to explain their feelings. Your feelings are just your feelings, and that was my feeling when I was writing it. I think it was mainly because in normal life, I'm someone who, as most of us do, worry a lot about what I've said and whether I've upset people and whether I'm doing the right thing. And Chrissy, partly because of her age and partly because of just who she is, she does not give a shit. You know, she could not care less about hurting people. That's really not her MO. She does what she likes. And that was, and you know, she says the things that we're all thinking, I think sometimes. She kind of cuts through with that sort of blunt, deadpan manner. And that was really quite refreshing and quite freeing to write in that way. And I found I enjoyed writing the kind of humor. I think it's easy to forget when there's such a dark subject matter that you know there's space for humor in there. And I don't know if it's funny. I think it's quite funny. I think they're quite funny books.
Chrissy is very funny. I mean, it's awful, but she is. She's hilarious.
Yes, I think she doesn't mean to be, and I think she's largely funny as a result of just being young. But I enjoy writing humor. I found that really quite delicious, and I enjoyed glimpsing those opportunities for humor in the kind of mesh of the more difficult stuff. That was really quite satisfying.
Yeah. So you mentioned just there, you said, you know, in your normal life, how, you know, you're kind of anxious about what you say. You still have a day job, don't you? You have a real job. What do you do?
I'm an assistant psychologist.
Right. And are you intending to continue with that? You're going to give it all up? What's your plan?
It's really tricky. I think long term, I feel very undecided about most things, Paula. I feel
quite young.
Yeah, quite young. I'm going to hang on to that for a long time. I look younger than I am, but I'm going to hang on to that for a long time. I don't really know. There's a part of me that thinks it would be really lovely to be a writer all the time. Then there's a part of me that thinks, would I get lonely? Would I end up just, you know, wasting time? Do I need the kind of stimulation of being forced to interact with lots of other people? And you know, at the moment, my profession is psychology. That's quite useful for writing. So basically, I don't know. Watch this space.
Okay. And the question that everybody loves is, are you working on anything new? We also love that question.
Yes, so glad you've asked that. I am thinking about working on something new. Sometimes people ask me, because I've written 2 non-fiction books and this is my first novel, ask me, will you go back to non-fiction? I don't think I will. I've really enjoyed fiction so far. I've enjoyed the elasticity of it. I think I would like to continue writing fiction, but writing is quite hard. For me, it's quite hard. I find it quite hard. And I don't have anything massively on the go at the moment. I'm just kind of living through the pandemic and just being...
Yeah. Was fiction liberating as by contrast with non-fiction? Yeah,
that's exactly the word I would use, because you're not constrained by facts.
But yes, that's what I like about it.
Yes, exactly.
Making stuff up.
Yeah, it's a lovely feeling.
Yeah, I do.
You both make up lovely books, so we can't wait for you to continue to make up lovely books. Oh my gosh, such a great conversation. Thank you both for sharing so much. In the comment section, Nancy, we have, it's really fun, Cousin Susan and Joe are here watching you. I love it when family supports. It's always so much fun. And then Arlene has a question. And Nancy, I'm not sure if you can answer, or if Paula, this is more for you, but talking about the book and comparing books, it's really interesting. But in terms of the fear factor in this book, what other books would you liken it to? I know what I could liken it to.
That's a really good question. I mean, my favorite book that deals with a kind of similar theme is We Need to Talk About Kevin. That's a kind of obvious comparison, but it's a brilliant book. It is my favorite book in the world, not just on this theme. I think it's a masterpiece. I should know this because you get asked this all the time when you're submitting your book. If people, your publishers want to know. We Need to Talk About Kevin. What other book?
The one that I thought about as I was reading it, did either of you read The Butcher Boy by Patrick McCabe?
No,
I never read it.
Oh, I had those same feelings reading this book as that. And so if anybody has read that out there, it's a different story, obviously, but it's the same sort of bad child you know, doing bad things, but yet circumstances are such that, you know, they just.
Yeah, interesting. The butcher boy.
There is, of course, the bad seed, which you do reference in your, but which is a bit more schlocky. I don't think it's quite as psychologically astute.
I read a review, which was me reading too many of my own reviews. It was like a good review saying this book is patently lifted from the bad seed. And I thought, I didn't even know that was a book.
You're fine.
I'm so sorry, I haven't read. I wasn't aware of it. Yeah, so I was aware of that only by name, but I haven't read it. I don't think I'll rush to.
Yeah, if you get to read The Butcher Boy, because I'm curious to see if you would think that there's similarities to it, because it's an older book though. But and one of the things that I kind of picked up too, it was a subtle thing, and so not having children, I was curious because you pick up the other parent's view of Chrissy really well. I mean, those subtle little things like, oh, she's still here, and Chrissy hears that in the background, you know, and those are things I think that as a parent, sometimes we've had our friends' kids over that we kind of feel that way about. It's like, oh my God, she's still here. Can't she go home? But yet that sense of community, there's still something that they want to take care of her.
Yeah, I'm really glad you pick up on that, because I think that's really significant in terms of Chrissy's whole makeup and the whole way she views the world. You know, she's got these parents who are fairly hostile towards her, but then, you know, she's living in a community where everyone is quite hostile towards her. She has kind of occasional glimpses of someone taking pity and taking her in and giving her a bowl of cereal. But the main message she's getting from everyone is, oh, it's Chrissy the troublemaker. I think that's quite corrosive for Chrissy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I wanted, we talked about earlier, I can't remember if we were on screen or off when we talked about this, but I was telling Paula and Nancy that I have the same feeling about this book as we did when we opened up Girl on the Train. It just grabs you by the throat and does not let you go. But don't let that title fool you, people.
Went through many incarnations of the title.
Did you? Because what can you share what some of the first?
One of them was going to be Bad Seed. Nobody chose to tell me that was already the name of the book. They just said, "Oh no, I think maybe that's not a very good idea." I'm terrible at titles. It's apart from planning, it's my biggest weakness. I come up with horrible titles, awful titles.
Right.
My agent would attest to that, definitely. What other ideas did we have? No, I can't remember. Oh, well, I mean, when I was working on it, it was just called Chrissy.
Okay.
Month, it was just called.
Yeah, because that's who, yeah. But it is one of those titles, I think, when people come across it, it's like, until they read that first line, they might, the black cover might give it away too a little bit, though. It's like, oh, it's not this. But I love that takes on its own ominous meaning, too. The first day of spring, you know, that's a really so well, we're about out of time. Let's see if I got anything else coming in. I've really enjoyed this so much. Lovely questions, Paula, and wonderful to see you. This is from Rebecca White, Nancy, so you know who Rebecca is.
These are all my friends and relations.
I love that they're here watching you. And Paula, I alluded to the fact that you have a new book coming. It's in October, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And if you just wait 1 second, I can. Sorry, do a bit of promo on your time, Nancy. It is No Fire Burning, that's the US cover there. And it is out on August 31st. So.
Okay.
You've got a lot of post-its.
I was deciding when I'm going to do readings.
Very good. It's very organized, Paula. Well done.
Yeah. Well, this was absolutely wonderful. So Nancy, for you, where should people go to find out more about you? Do you have a website, or are you just doing social media? What are you doing right now?
I don't have a website at the moment. No, I think I haven't really thought about having a website. It seems a bit arrogant, but it's probably quite a good idea.
Yeah.
Twitter is probably the best place.
Okay. Yep, that's a good one. And then Paula, I'm sure you've got a website where people can go and see where you do everything.
It's not arrogant if you have a website, Paula, because you're very well established.
You'll need to get one, Nancy. I'm telling you, you're gonna need to get that website.
I have a website, it's paulahawkinsbooks.com. I am not on Twitter any longer, but I am on Instagram.
Ah, okay.
They're just generally pictures of what I've been reading or walks that I've been on. It's not exciting, but there you go.
People still like that little glimpse. I think that's the thing. And I think it's, you know, it's hard to know how much to give and how much to keep, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's a really, and so Nancy, you're probably going to need to take some advice here, because I see this shooting star happening. So.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. If I get on the train of success, then I will be a lucky, lucky woman.
Have you? I'm going to have one more question, and you might not want to answer this, so just say so. But is there sort of interest from the film TV world that we can talk about yet? Or
sadly not. No. I think
I'm sure that will come. Don't you worry.
Nice. I mean, it would present many challenges as a book, screen transformation. So I won't break my heart if that doesn't happen, but it would be exciting if it did.
Yeah, that takes it into a whole different trajectory. But yeah. I think just this book alone, Paula, certainly your book, it's just, boy, this is a compelling book, and it grabs you and does not let you go. And I cannot wait for everybody. It's out today, everybody. I put it in the link. I put Paula's book in the link to pre-order. It was wonderful having both of you today. Thank you to Riverhead for letting us do this.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it so much, and hope to see you all again. So I will take us off of Facebook and stop the recording. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.